Xrfiles is going to be kicking off in a minute, and then we're going to mute everybody's mic, so the sound will be better once we get going.
Yes,
and
the trigger does
hopefully you'll enjoy
Why
it.
does the trigger does that fist? This is weird.
When we've got the live stream finished, we will edit the video and put it out on this channel as well, so you can relive it or watch it again at your leisure. Hello, everybody.
Joe, you are ready to go.
So, welcome to the Xrfiles in conjunction with Rivi. We're doing the World War II Nation, and Joe Harvey is going to take the lecture and take you through it. So I'm going to hand it over first to Alex, talk about a little bit about Rivi and introduce it, and then we'll have Dan on as well, and Chris. Alex, over to you.
Okay, so let's give you a brief little overview of River while we're here on the live stream looking at these models as I follow you around, Marcus. You're just going through all the models, finding all the models. Yeah, I can hear my voice a little bit. So, River, thanks Brian. River is reality and virtual reality, and we create photorealistic VR environments. And what you can see around us are some of the assets that Joe and Alex Foster and Lawrence and the guys at World War II Nation have been putting together to bring to this event, so we can all have a bit of a hands-on experience with it, with a history lesson. I always find it a lot more interesting when I'm spatially learning about something and I can actually pick up the object. So I'm looking forward to what these guys have got to show, because I know we're going to see a nice large landscape of Normandy.
Daniel here from Educators in VR, and in this day and age with coronavirus, there's a real fear amongst educators that we're going to lose access to culture. And of course, we all want to get traveling again, but this right now represents the closest way for school children or anybody studying this kind of history to actually experience it in a meaningful way, other than going there directly. So it's very timely that these photogrammetry models are available now, when it's less, well, there are more challenges to getting there physically, but even without COVID, the ability to interact with these kind of models and these experiences, you would be saving, you know, for a class of school children to visit from the UK this place in France. They used to do that. They used to do exchange programs to France and so on. And most schools try to do some kind of exchange programs. They can still do that. Now they can also do all of this, you know, which is absolutely amazing. So from an educational standpoint, as an educator, this is absolutely amazing, rather than just watching a video about it. Okay.
Agree.
Yeah, thanks Alex. Thanks guys for hosting us all here, and thanks everyone else for making it here tonight or this afternoon or this morning or wherever you are. Yeah, so basically, as Alex just say, I'm Alex's brother, and we're both part of River, along with Alex Foster, and we've got Ross in here and Tyrone. There's a few of the River guys in here tonight. But what we're going to be showing you in this session is what a history lesson in virtual reality might look like. What we're going to be doing is basically, I'll take you from the start, really. So myself, Alex Foster here, and Lawrence all form part of World War II Nation. World War II Nation was started by Lawrence and a friend of his, Ross, back in 2014, and their mission was basically to educate, remember, and commemorate World War II history, and put content out to lots of different people, whether that's podcasts, photography, videography. So that's what World War II Nation is. Me and Foster joined forces with Lawrence at World War II Nation in 2018, and we wanted to help create some video content for the channel, which we've done. We went across Europe on a 8-day trip, I think it was, following Hitler's Case Yellow, which was the invasion of Western Europe in 1940. Some good videos on the YouTube channel if you ever find time to go in there and take a look. So obviously, being part of a virtual reality company and a media company, I wanted to push forward into some sort of virtual reality for history, and Alex Foster was also the same on that with me. Alex Foster's my brother-in-law. We're both passionate about history. We both work for the same company, and that's the direction we wanted to move in. And we thought World War II Nation was a perfect vessel, really, to try and push forward with that. So we've been talking about it for some time, and trying to think of how history lessons could be taught in VR and what kind of history lessons we wanted to show. We came up with lots of different ideas, battles during World War II that we wondered how we could recreate these big scenes and demonstrate and show people exactly what took place and how that happened, during that time. There was lots of different things. I don't know how many people here are familiar with much World War II history. Put your hand up if you know much about World War II and D-Day and all that sort of business. There's one or two of you, which is good. So we were looking at things like famous actions like the Pegasus Bridge action on D-Day. That was one of the first actions to take place, securing some very important bridges, and other things like, if you've seen Band of Brothers, you'll know about the I forget the name of the Brecourt Manor. The famous assault on Brecourt Manor would be another really good one. Anyway, another one that I really thought would be good was Point du Hoc. Me and Alex Harvey, my brother, went on a family holiday to Brittany. As we travelled down through France, we went to all of the beaches. We came to Omaha Beach, and we looked out over this, a picturesque coastline in Normandy, and there was loads of people enjoying the beach and sunbathing and playing badminton and all of this sort of stuff. And we kind of, it's great to see it like that, but it sort of took away the historical side of it for us. And that, we wanted to see what happened there on the 6th of June 1944. We wanted to see the vast armada of battleships all approaching the coast, and the soldiers coming up and taking enemy fire. And we kind of said to each other, wouldn't it be great to have some sort of AR experience where you can stand there at the cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach and have all of this stuff overlaid in a way so you could appreciate the actual location and what happened there. History and education is one that I really think would be a good direction to go. Yeah.
Okay, just put in a sorry a minute.
Go on, Brian.
Everybody that's attending we're trying to look at how we would make these into lessons and stuff like that. So it'd be great to have your input, feedback. So if you don't say tonight, if we post on LinkedIn or something like that, or even on the YouTube channel, just add your comments. Just add. So we need to learn from this as well as we like to teach you a little bit about history. So yeah, any comments are welcome.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. So as you can see there, the big model of Point du Hoc, that is actually because we couldn't actually get to Point du Hoc because COVID hit. We were booked in to go there, in the process of being booked in to go there. We were going to have the whole site to fly the drones and make a real photogrammetry model of it. But COVID hit, so that all got cancelled. So what we did was we created a photogrammetry model of Point du Hoc using Google Earth. So what you're seeing here is a Google Earth, our version of the Google Earth model of Point du Hoc. Anyone can access it. It's a 3D section of the Normandy coastline done by Google. We took a screen capture video circling around, and then Ross in reality capture use that video to create this placeholder model for me. So I've been working closely with Alex Foster and Lawrence on researching everything to do with the Point du Hoc invasion, and I'm going to hand over in a second to them so they can talk you through everything that happened on the day, and that is going to be our history lesson for the day.
Brian,
So, yeah, sorry.
cheers, Joe.
Yeah,
Yes.
all right. So Alex Foster and Lawrence from World War II Nation.
I think Daniel, you made a really good point earlier about education and how it's getting harder and harder to get to these places and absorb the information, especially when a pandemic like COVID-19 happens. How do we get hundreds of thousands of kids and educators to these historic locations? It's so hard, not only financially but logistically, and what sort of information are they absorbing? Now, I remember as a kid going over there, and I just stood at the back yawning as we walked around cemeteries, and it sounds really bad, but was I engaged? Probably not.
Exactly.
Now we're at a stage where we can actually engage people that, yes, they do have a short attention span, but they're also at an age where, are they going to remember this? It's only when you get older. So myself, Joe, and Lawrence to my right, this is our passion, and we have had this as a passion for years, but it's only recently where we've really been able to engorge what we see, and through virtual reality we're now able to not only remember what we've seen, but we've got it as an everlasting experience that we can go back to. So going back to education, especially in Britain, the structure, I'm not going to talk about this for long, but the structure's quite interesting. At the age of 14, you get to choose whether you want to take history as in the curriculum. And I remember, especially my history class, was get a book out and we're going to read about the rise and fall of the Third Reich. Right. And it was a bit like, I'm reading it, but it's not that interesting. Put me in an environment where I can grasp the tyranny or grasp the scale that was going on, and I think people are going to remember it more, and they're actually going to get a bit excited about what they can learn and how much more they can learn.
Absolutely. Just a very brief point to that. I think one of the reasons when you reading is by necessity an abstraction of ideas and thoughts. When you have models, it spatially speaks to your mind in a direct way.
You've got it, Daniel. And Alex Harvey touched on it. That's how he wants to learn. He wants to take in models, take in a three-dimensional world. I'm the same, Joe's the same, and Lawrence is the same. Being there hit home. It hits home, and we remember. The amount of information we've absorbed from being there is massive. Now, the hurdles, which you'll all be thinking, how do we get hundreds of thousands of schools to have a virtual reality setup in their schools, in their classrooms? The answer is it will probably take a few years for it to become feasible. A British classroom is roughly 30. Now, put your hands up if you sat down. So we're all able to sit down and still experience a three-dimensional world spatially, which I think is really cool. So education is probably for another day, but we do have a passion for pushing this into education.
I think it's I'll just add in here. I think it's a matter of it is the future of education coming through and getting an experience in these things. And I think it needs to be something that's a joint effort from all around the country, so that we get some sort of commonality and some spreads and stuff like that.
You're right, Brian. And what is I don't know what the education minister is looking at in terms of virtual reality, but they've got to act quick, because the percentage of teenagers that are hobbyists in virtual reality is rising rapidly. Put a presentation in front of them or a book, they're not going to concentrate as much as they would have 20 years ago, because it's too slow. Their lifestyle now is quick, immersive, engaging experiences.
Cool.
Okay.
Cheers, Foz. Thanks for that. So I think we've got a lot of history to cover with Lawrence. So
Yeah.
I think if we all push over to this side of the room by the clock, I'm going to leave you with Alex and Lawrence, and they're going to talk through with you the action which took place on Pointe du Hoc on the morning of D-Day, June 6th, 1944.
Cheers, Joe. So this model is pretty cool, isn't it? It's almost like a sand table. So we're going to go into the real implications that went on with this invasion, with this specialist mission. But I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what's going on April, May 1944. So a famous date is obviously the 6th of June 1944. But what we have here is Pointe du Hoc, which runs along the Normandy coastline. So Germany is struggling. There's multiple fronts. So looking at 1943, Germany, they've just had horrific defeats at Stalingrad and the Battle of Kursk. The Battle of Kursk being the largest tank battle ever in the history. Stalingrad, I'm pretty sure, was the bloodiest battle. So Germany on the Eastern Front are really struggling. When you look down to the Mediterranean theatre of operations, they're really struggling in Sicily and Italy. The US Army are now involved, and things aren't going very well. They're also really struggling in the Atlantic Ocean. Famous film that's just come out, Greyhound, looking at the merchant ships getting supplies over the Atlantic, and the infamous U-boats and the Wolf Pack. So they might have been scary, but they weren't really doing as good a job as they could have, because supplies are coming in thick and fast into Europe, where the Allies are now plotting to really get a stronghold of Europe and defeat Hitler and the Nazis. So there's an inevitable threat from the Allied invasion. Like I said already, you're looking at the Mediterranean theatre of operations at the Atlantic. The US are coming. So what do? The US start to pile into Great Britain. That's going to be their HQ for now. And they want a second front. It's not a case of if, but it's when and where. So you've got the Supreme Allied Commander, Ike, with Monty on our side, and they're plotting with Churchill's and Roosevelt's blessing. So, like I said, it's not if, but it's when and where. And there were a few little decoys that the Allies did, but I'll go into that later. So just going back to the situation with the Germans. So Hitler had something called a Festung Europa, which was basically, it was the directive from the Führer. He wanted to really fortify this coastline, the Atlantic Wall they called it, and it literally it stretched all the way from the Pyrenees, and it followed the coastline all the way up to Norway. It was huge. It was just under 1,700 miles long, which is a massive fortification. If you look on the screens, you can see in yellow the sheer size of what Hitler wanted, this Festung Europa. You're looking at 40 fortifications minimum. Now, in today's sort of pricing, it would be crazy. To pull off something like this in such a short period of time, it takes a lot of doing, but you're forgetting that Hitler will throw everything at it. So Albert Speer, he took over the TOT organization. Now, this was the engineering sort of group. So these were the guys that would go in and they would create these fortifications. It was actually made up of 300,000 soldiers. But what's quite harrowing to workers that they had at any given time, which could have been around 250,000 workers. So we all know the tyranny from the Nazis. This was slave labor, which is horrible to think, but it was the only way that they could get these huge fortifications along this coastline in such a short period of time. Now, when you look at some of the figures of what the organisation TOT was about, you're looking at about 1.2 million tons of steel, 17 million cubic meters of concrete. the cost, it was about 3.7 billion Reichmarks, which is around $206 billion today. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. So obviously the coastline meets the water. 5 million mines were laid deep into the oceans, the North Sea, and then going up to the Baltic Sea. So Hitler really wanted to make not only a wall, but a huge barrier getting to the wall as well. If you look on the maps there, you can see that there's 2 of the beaches either side of Point de Hoc. Now, we'll go on to that in a minute. So there was a guy that
Foz, can I just stop you?
Yeah.
Very, very quickly, sorry. I've put a teleport area up here so you can stand here. So you don't lose your legs. As you were.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. So there's a guy that's going to have to be in charge of this, and there was someone that was pretty much in charge of it in 2 occasions. So looking at November 1943.
And another one is taken out by some of the anti-aircraft guns. They take them out. So already, before they hit the beach, they're already taking casualties, and they've already lost a percentage of their force. There's actually 225 guys, 225 rangers tasked with getting up these cliffs. By the time they get to the base of the cliff, there's about 190. They've already taken quite a few casualties. And one of the things is, there's a load of trenches along here. Sorry, I can't see very clearly from here, but the trench positions along here. And the Germans start shooting down these guys as soon as they get out of their crafts. And you'll see a few of the weapons scattered around these positions. You can have a look at in a minute, which are carried both by the US Rangers and obviously the German defenders. You can have a quick look around those in a minute when they get opened up. Because one of them, which I can't see from here, somewhere over there, should be a German. Sorry, that's not the one. That's a different grenade. But there is a German potato mash, as it's nicknamed.
They're
A stick
all open
grenade.
now as well, so you can pick them all up.
The aircraft was shot down, and they actually joined the Rangers and scaling the cliffs and get involved in the fighting. And also, don't forget the British. We were here too as well. We had a representative. I know Foster would love to cover this in a bit more depth, but obviously I don't want to take up too much time with this. But during the training, the Rangers were trained in part by the British commandos, and one of those was an expert in scaling cliffs, Lieutenant Colonel Travis Trevor. And he was here as well. He joined these guys in the assault and was part of it. Actually got wounded in the head by an MG position. So come to D+2, so that is the 8th of June. These guys have been fighting for their lives against the Germans, but relief is finally here. I'm summarising this very much, so I don't want you all to fall asleep, so apologies in advance. But D+2, around noon on the 8th of June, help is here. These guys are finally relieved, and the link-up is completed with US Rangers elements from Omaha Beach from the 29th Division. And an interesting thing happens. I said to you about the lack of supplies. Obviously, these guys are fighting with anything they can get their hands on, and that includes German gear. So they're using the Mauser, K98. I think we do have an example of that potentially in the room as well. The MG42, the MG34, MP40, anything they can get their hands on that has ammunition, they're using that against the Germans. Now, the issue that creates is when these guys are relieved by their American counterparts from the 5th Rangers and from other elements from Omaha Beach, is they can hear the very distinctive sound of German fire, because it does have a very distinctive sound different to their usual, to their own weapons like the Thompson or the Garand rifle. And unfortunately, 2 of the different ranger groups exchange fire, and some of the relieving elements are killed in this firefight until they actually realise what's going on, that it's actually US troops engaging each other. But out of the 225 rangers and other personnel, I should say the Navy personnel, etc., that were involved in this, that scaled the cliff, only 90 were able to bear arms when they were finally relieved on the 8th of June. And I will pass you over to Joe or Alex.
Wow, that was just that last comment. Only 90 of them were able to bear arms. Just kind of shows what troopers these were. Now, so they were, like Loz said, they were British UK commando trained for special operations. Formed in 1942, and where were they? They trained in Scotland, didn't they, Loz? In Achnacarry.
Well, not the second Rangers, but generally when they were formed, yes, they did. They trained. They basically got their beret, their green beret, and they got their special service knife as well, which the British commandos carried.
Brilliant. brilliant. And then they did a lot of cliff scaling in the Isle of Wight and on the Devon coast. You're talking 200 plus feet of coastal cliffs that they obviously had to scale. But I think, Joe, I think it was yourself that mentioned something that kind of hit home to me. These guys would have been soaking wet, and then they've got to scale up a cliff. which and if you look behind at the model of the, it's myself actually knelt down with a Thompson machine gun, just have a look at the amount of gear that he's got on. So he had they would have had special tactical vests, as they would have called them, for extra ammo, extra explosive, anything additional they needed, because they needed everything on them as they scaled up the cliff. You've also then got your heavy helmet, your thick sodden boots, and you've got your gun and your ammunition. So when you talk about an upheaval, imagine trying to scale a cliff just like that.
Well, you actually
also,
sorry to interject there. You actually get a couple of examples of guys carrying bazookas up the cliff.
yeah.
And they get used against the observation post. So they literally are having to carry everything they need.
As you can see here, it's a bit. If you look at Major Dick Winters, who is dotted to my right, they're a bit different. There's the Ranger doesn't maybe have pockets on his trousers. He wouldn't have obviously had a parachute. So there were all these specialist units and different divisions within the U.S. Army, Navy, and the Air Force, and they all had different uniforms for different needs, really. He's got a Thompson machine gun. I think the most common weapon of choice was the Garand, wasn't it, Loz? For the
Yeah, that's just standard U.S. infantry rifle. A bit like the Germans with the KR-98, the Mauser.
Very good. So the Germans, the Germans struggled, and just going on this Atlantic Wall was getting peppered, and as you can assume, work was suspended. Now, just going back to our guy Erwin Rommel, on the morning of 6th of June 1944, the commander of this vast Atlantic Wall, this well established officer, he was actually in Berlin for his wife's birthday. So you can imagine the horror when he gets a phone call at his family house saying the invasion has happened, the landings are going on. He's got to somehow get from Berlin straight back and try and withhold this attack. Now, I think there's a famous story of they didn't want to ring Hitler and wake him up because he hated being woken up in the early hours of the morning. So they delayed letting Hitler know that the Allied Expeditionary Force had landed in the largest what would you say it was, the largest amphibious landing in the history of warfare. They didn't want to wake him, so they let him sleep for a few hours, and then when he was ready, having his vegetarian breakfast, they broke the news. So you can imagine he wasn't too happy about that. Awesome, fantastic stuff.
Thanks, guys. That
No
was
worries.
really good. The presentation from World War II Nation, Lawrence and Alex. Try and get onto the website to check all the different stuff that we do. Have a look at our videos across Europe, and hopefully in the future we'll have another history lesson to present to you, or perhaps even you might see us on location at one of these famous places in Normandy or wherever. Chris, were you going to take us all somewhere else, or perhaps we could ask some
Chris,
questions?
what's happening?
Yeah,
I think
just
we have
before we go,
before we go,
maybe get your questions ready. Have a think if you want to ask something. I just wanted to say, to see this 3D model and to have experts on the subject really point to the cliff, the boat, the spatially, I will remember this in a completely different way. And I think I've actually driven past here with my wife on honeymoon. I wish I'd stopped actually now. But a little thing. I mean, it's kind of fun to see the models appear and the boats and the people, but that actually adds a lot. And particularly we had a soldier, a big soldier lying down here. That was really moving. The look almost into his eyes as he's aiming. That was really powerful. Little things like that. I mean, your audio, your description of the timeline is amazing. But this model here, I find that so moving when you can actually get up and. So
yeah, if I just explain a little bit about the model that you're seeing here, this is actually Alex Foster dressed up in all of the correct Ranger gear.
So don't get on the wrong side of Alex.
I'm reverbing through your mic. But yeah, so when we create our final scene, we will want all of our models, as mentioned, to be photorealistic.
There is also, if I'm not mistaken, in Engage, there's the function to use models, and then create a recording. So you can create a recording and start and stop it. So you could have had models moving in, and like a video, you can start and stop it and give your description alongside it, which as an educator, if you build that kind of an experience once, then any educator could learn to give the script, but that's shareable then. That's amazing, that creation content.
And it's the scale as well, isn't it, Daniel?
Yeah.
So we've dotted these LCAs around. There would have been hundreds of these, and this it's again looking at commemoration, which is one of the core values of World War II Nation. This is millions of men and women who lost their lives, and it would have been thousands of men and women who lost their lives on this day, this invasion, which is harrowing. So for us to even just get everyone to imagine it, just even a slightly bit more than watching a documentary, then I think that commemoration will stay long in your memory and in your heart, and that's one of the reasons why we do it.
Another thought would be wonderful is if we could have some soldiers' uniforms to change into. And for example, this face behind us, you could lift that and superimpose it on an avatar. I speak German. I could come and give you a German accent or some German lines.
Next time I want to see that. I'm going to hold you to that.
All right, you get me the.
We have to look at the ethics of that.
People
might get offended.
I'm genuinely I have genuinely German roots, so I'll stand by that. But we just need an avatar, and then we could superimpose the face. But just the possibilities, for history, for any kind of history.
We could do you in black and white as well.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just wondering if there's any questions from the audience before we move on to Chris.
Should we do questions in the next scene?
Yeah, we can do.
Let's move on over. I want to play off a little bit of what Karen was saying. What is the actual scale? So I thought it would be great to take a 360 tour to the coast to see just how big these cliffs are. Now, the 360 video is very dependent on your bandwidth, so I can't promise that everyone's going to have a super smooth experience. I am going to take the resolution down from 4K to 1080 to try to accommodate everybody, but let's give this a go, and I'll see you on the other side.
Excellent.
Yeah, we'll drop on top of each other. It's quite good.
Okay.
So everybody's that's about right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so we're watching 360. Oh, yes. Look at this.
We are. If you guys want to, you can walk up the ramps or teleport up to the top level here. It's a nice view. And it'll keep you grounded. It's going to take about 1 minute and 30 seconds to get to the place where I want. We're going to take a little tour of this area over the next 1 minute and 30, and there is going to be some flying. So sometimes it's helpful to be on a stable environment when we're flying around.
Yeah.
And so let me get that media going. There we go.
This platform also plays 3D as well as 360, right, Chris?
It does, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so pretty soon there's going to be more and more educational material of like 360 and 3D. as these cameras become ubiquitous.
I think that's what we're excited about, Daniel. We've kind of done what we can with the resources available to us. I'm so excited to see what education and even travel and tourism industries will look like with virtual reality, even in 2 years' time. So we've been able to scan this now.
Yeah, so you've got the scanning, and then we've got a $400 3D and 360 camera.
Perfect.
Which does amazingly well. You know, it's the price of a headset, price of a laptop, price of a whatever, and a school can afford a 3D camera.
So this was a thought that I had. Imagine if you couldn't go on the travel on the tours.
Yeah.
Film it. Film the tour. Film the cemeteries. Film the battlefields, and have you go there.
Yeah, people are gonna go. Create the footage and sell it as they should, and people will buy it as well. I would buy good footage of interesting places in 3D. Look at this. This is amazing.
I do think we need to put some sort of standards behind it, because some of the footage you get in 360 is not that good.
Of course, but I totally agree. But I think we need more people getting into it as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Here we go.
Here we go. Look at this. Wow. Wow.
Okay, there we go.
Wow.
Good work.
Take a good look at those cliffs.
So that's the scale of what they were climbing.
So we mentioned grappling hooks, projectile hooks off the boats. The percentage that actually below it was very much what you see in G.I. Joe. It wasn't as successful as it could have been. The ropes were wet that the grappling hooks were attached to, so they were heavier. So their trajectory workings out obviously didn't work.
Got you. Wow.
Yeah, so you had
That
US
is
Rangers
huge.
even trying to free climb. So that means obviously digging their daggers in, trying to scale this up there.
Wow.
And you had handheld projectiles as well. So obviously we talked about the rockets off the LCAs. They also had like little handheld rocket launchers as well to fire ladders and ropes up.
Yeah.
But quite a lot of these guys came under fire, especially the ones that landed further. Hang on, I've got the pointer on this. No.
You'd be a sitting duck, wouldn't you? You'd be a sitting duck if they were just looking over. Imagine someone looking over a cliff and just shooting at you. There's nowhere to go.
The one thing that helped was that we were talking about that naval bombardment. One of the shells actually knocked a big chunk out of the cliff, so it reduced the climb in one area from 100 feet to about 60 feet. So they got on top of the mound. And that helped those guys in that area scale it. But you can only imagine the ropes being cut by the guys on the top and the guy falling down.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
So it's interesting because the Germans, they didn't actually expect an attack from the sea. They were setting up all sorts, the defensive bunkers, machine gun pits, barbed wire, anti-glider posts, because they were thinking there'll be some sort of airborne assault. So they would flood fields, they would put barbed wire and obstacles in the way to stop any mass landing from the air. Obviously, we know the famous airborne invasion that happened hours before. Although they were miles off their drop zones, it was still very useful.
I think it's fantastic, the scale and perspective it gives something like this, and orientation. Because it's all good reading it in a book, it's all good looking at a map, but I mean, this really brings it to life in terms of orientating yourself on what happened from where.
Yeah, you're right. And these are real places. We're seeing a real place, which
it's that memory thing, isn't it, Foz? Alex, as you know, you're dealing with people all the time who are learning in virtual reality, and what's the knowledge retention they're talking about at the moment in VR?
Well, they think sixfold. So you're 6 times likely to remember something in virtual reality than you are e-learning, PowerPoint, and PDF. Now, that's from a study in America, and there's hundreds of studies ongoing. So watch this space, guys, because you can see virtual reality having a place in education and knowledge retention because the stats back it up. And in 2020, we're now in a world where everyone learns differently. Alex Harvey mentioned spatially, that's how he learns. Some people like colours, some people like written text, some people like audio. We've got to cater to everyone's needs if we're to have that knowledge retention as high as we need it.
Yeah. Then there's the aspect also, you have the experience of the learning, but with the technologies now, I mean, content creation of learning, so even students can get involved in creating their own scenes. Imagine that this was a student's presentation.
Yeah,
it's not going to be long until they'll have access to a platform like Engage, which will be connected to Blender. They spend half an hour creating a recorded lesson, giving a presentation of this battle themselves as their class project.
Yeah, and what they see and how they present it is really important, because that's half of how you retain knowledge, your own notes.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And if your notes, and if your notes was taking 360 footage of a battle, then that's amazing. You're going to remember it.
Well, the other thing is, this is a model. The scale of this model is really amazing, but it won't be long either until we can actually put this up to maybe 3/4 size of the actual scale, walk around it, sit at the bottom of the cliff, look up. Exactly. Yeah. It won't take long.
I was saying about the learning of the students, but there's no reason why this couldn't turn into their thesis, and they deliver a presentation, not write a 20,000 word essay.
and especially in Britain, it's very much learn for 6 months, and then I'm going to test you on a specific day in summer, and if you don't do well on that day, then you're not going to get the grades. It needs to be coursework, and something like this is going to be fantastic. I didn't do very well in history at school because of the way I was taught. Now I've gone to these places, I've watched different mediums of history,
also,
and
you
it's
could have
stuck in my head.
The assessment of this wouldn't have to be live. The student could record it, send it to the tutor or the assessor. They could see it when they wanted to, and have it could include the avatar of the student in the recording or not, and you could have direct proof of your understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was quite loud. And that's what we can do in VR. So if it is a case of there needs to be some sort of gauge of whether you've absorbed the information, we can put that in VR. So even if it's basic questions, or show me where the bunkers were situated, or why were the bunkers situated there? Well, they were situated there because it fired onto the beaches.
Or if you were a German soldier, how would you defend it? If you were an American, so I was wondering about that when you were giving us a rundown of what happened. One way is to say, well, the Germans were defending, the Americans were attacking. You could also, before you give them the information of what actually happened, you could say, well, what do you think happened, or how would you do it? And then you're involving them in thinking about, well, I can see that turret there has a really good vantage point of this close, and they can talk you through it, and you can find out how much the students already know or how much they can imagine.
Yeah, you're fleshing out.
Can you hear me?
Fleshing it out. Yep.
Yeah.
I can hear you breathing.
Cool. No,
so you were saying about wanting to develop educational material. I'd love to work with you on some of this stuff, definitely. Yeah. In terms of workshops and activities.
Somebody's trying to ask a question. Who was that?
Sorry.
I was just curious how you are using this now. Is this just is this concept? What are your plans for?
Yeah. So I'll touch on it, and Joe will elaborate. This is very much a proof of concept. purely because we're waiting for this pandemic to lift, and then we can start presenting to the right people. We've already had the right conversations with people in education and museums, etc. But as a proof of concept, Karen, we're very close to having something that we feel could be rolled out. Joe, do you want to elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, so our initially we wanted to get this to a position where we could put it onto Steam and get people to pay a small amount, maybe a couple of pounds or something, to download it, just to see how it goes. I've been speaking to the guys at Point du Hoc about potentially having it on site there for their visitors to be able to use it. So the main areas that I really see this being used is at museums on location, in schools, and for people at home who are interested in it and want to just download it for themselves. But the other side to it is how is the best way to, what's the best format for it? Currently, the version that I've made in Unity is a voiceover experience where you teleport to different sections and you get a voiceover about each section of the battle. But I think a great way of doing it is how we've just done it. Daniel?
Can I suggest if you're going to go further down the line with this, as I hope you really will, I suggest you look at WebXR. Building this as a spatial WebXR, because the accessibility on any device and the scalability, and then it's open source. You can control your licenses, but you can get an army of people developing it with you. And this kind of history lesson, you were talking about the scale of that ambition that Hitler had. You could build it all out and include the whole thing. It could be.
I would love at one point for this to be like completely open source. Take a snapshot in time, 12 midday on June 6, 1944, D-Day. Get a map of the whole of Normandy, and everyone is there building it, researching what was happening at this time.
So I'm just upstairs with Chris, and I'd just like to say, Joe and Foster and everyone, me and Chris are at the top of this platform, and we are just trying out the new collisions. And when you jump off this platform, I'm not joking, you actually feel like you
like parachuting.
Are jumping.
You've gone.
Everyone can try it, it's fun.
Daniel, I was just going to say, Brian, I know, sorry, you were going to say something, but what's important in education in the UK specifically is your primary and secondary sources. So a primary source is very much, these are quotes, this is what happened. These are legitimate historians that have said this, this and this. You know, as we know, history's written by certain people. A secondary source is a newspaper. Ernie Pyle was a famous photographer and journalist in World War II. Let's have a look at his photos. Let's have a look at reconnaissance photos. Let's interview a German soldier. So these are your secondary sources, which are a bit harder to get hold of in current curriculum. Having something like this, what you do in WebXR, for example, drop an audio clip of someone that scaled the cliff, or a newspaper cutout. These are your secondary sources, and that's a big fat tick for secondary source education, or a source has been used for you to learn and absorb the information. Really important.
Just going to say, we're about coming towards the end. We've got about 15 minutes left. We want to be able to get some questions from the people in the audience, if there's any questions coming forward. Do we stay here, or do we move into another space for the questions? What's the consensus?
Should we go to our usual question time place?
Yeah, I would say so, because it's a bit distracting where everything's going on.
Playtime. It's playtime, isn't it? No, we're going to go back to the workshop.
If we talk about where we all went, we usually go at the end, is the open air Abbey, so everyone can spread out and chat.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, cool. Haven't seen that yet.
Otherwise,
here we
it's
go.
a little bit compact.
Excellent.
So 3D voice should allow us, not yet, but when we do spread out after some questions, it should allow us to get to our own areas and not have too much interference from other people talking.
Hey, Chris, Can I ask you something?
Come on, yeah, come on over here.
Okay, here's the thing. I'm building an archaeological site construction.
Joe, you here? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think Brian, Joe, Lawrence, Foster, you guys should line up somewhere with on 3D voice. I think Chris has just gone over there with someone else. And I think we should have a few questions if anyone's got any questions about that presentation.
Yeah.
Alex,
Yeah,
I'd love to stay. I'm going to have to get back to my family. Thank you very much, everyone. Great session.
Dan.
Looking forward to the next one. I'd have
Cheers, Dan.
101 questions. You know me, but thank you. Great
Thanks, Dan.
presentation, guys. All right, take care.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.
So guys, I think we'll stop here because we're next to Oscar is running the channel. So any
Yeah,
questions,
cool.
fire this way. Also, the guys out on YouTube, if you're watching in, if you want to drop a question, put it in the comments box, and then Oscar will ask the question to everybody here. So, any questions from anybody to anybody?
Hello.
We need to unmute everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Can we unmute everybody?
Yeah, can everyone hear me now? Everyone can speak if they are open. Lawrence, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
How, because we haven't chatted too much, but where did your passion come from? When did you start learning all about history or want to know all about the history stuff? Because when you were talking and actually pointing at the things on the map, that's the bit for me that got me interested when you were saying they came from here and went to here and then this happened and this happened. But to know that sort of stuff, did you research it or have you always been looking at that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been fascinated by it. I never really picture or sort of nail down that Davosy moment where it's like that's what it was that got me into history. It's always been a fascination. Like most boys growing up playing with army soldiers, or in my case, playing computer games like Battlefield 1942, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sucked into the likes of Band of Brothers, and it's sort of growing from there. My grandmother on my mother's side is actually German, and I remember her telling me certain stories because she grew up in the Third Reich. So there's certain little stories like that that again drew me in, wanted me basically to suck me into learning more about the whole period of time, and it's just growing from there since primary school, really.
I remember Joe with his obsession with the same subject, World War II. Joe, as a child, used to build his model aeroplanes out of plastic fixed kits, and then pour a little bit of petrol on them, set fire to them, and throw them out the bedroom window.
Okay. Can't say I've tried that.
I'd say that explains a lot, to be honest.
Yeah. Now that's why he likes flying planes a lot.
So, Lawrence, going on the same question. So, how have you felt about using these tools in what you've already learned, and how these tools are sort of reinforcing what you're doing?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. I mean, like I touched on earlier, for me, the scope is incredible in what you can do, what you can bring to life, that history. If we take the example of the map here at Point de Hoc, it's fantastic to be able to orientate yourself and give people an idea of where things are and the perspective, which is very hard to do unless I'm out there guiding someone. And even then, you don't necessarily have the tools to be able to do that unless you're flying over with a drone.
So it's contextual more than anything. It's putting it in context to say where it is. Yeah.
Exactly.
I totally agree with you.
Touch different weapons which I wouldn't necessarily have access to. Look at different equipment, different vehicles, and these are some these things that I would not have access to unless I own them. And I don't work in a museum. I don't own a museum, and you can really bring that history to life.
Brian, when we followed Hitler's invasion of Western Europe, we went to a place and there was a massacre. And it was a cowshed, wasn't it, Loz? And we went to where the soldiers were thrown in and they were executed. And we read about it, didn't we? And we saw pictures. When you actually went there, you could almost feel it. It was such a cliche, but
atmospheric,
it was the hairs on the back of your neck stood up, and that was just a small piece of history that we experienced.
I had the same thing when I went to Alcatraz. I went out on the boat. and walking around Alcatraz, but then I had the earphones in, and you get that just when it puts it into contextual, adding those extra senses in gives you that a bit of immersive effect. And I can imagine the emotions that were going through you when you were experiencing that must have been quite overwhelming.
Yeah, weird, and it's now a bit of a. They've commemorated those who lost their lives, but it was eerily quiet. It's not a. It's they don't just say it just to add a poignant effect. When you go to these places where something bad has happened, Auschwitz or the Somme, etc., there's an eerie quietness about it, and you can almost feel. It. It's really hard to explain, but we'll probably never be able to get everyone there. Going back to the education element, but if we can make people just feel it that little bit in maybe a virtual world, a virtual environment, I think we've done our job of preserving and commemorating those who lost their lives in all of history.
I think
That's
it's
a really good point, Alex. Sorry to interject, Brian. That's all right. It's just
go.
I've had a few people say that when we did the videos for World War II Nation, there's quite a few people, for example, based in America, based in Australia, New Zealand, that have the same fascination with World War II history and want to learn more about it, but don't have the access to be able to visit these places easily. Like we can just obviously hop in a car, get on the ferry, and we're over there in a couple of hours kind of thing. Whereas for them, we're talking 24 plus hours travel and a very expensive trip. So it's being able to give people access to these locations, obviously in a different way, where they wouldn't normally have that access. And that's what we've done with the videos, but imagine what you can do with this
in a virtual world. And it's emotional access as well. It's getting the emotion across as well, isn't it, Brian?
I think it's a matter of making. It's like let's just never forget. I mean, it's all about giving that experience, keeping that experience, and sharing that experience. And that'll make people remember the sacrifice, remember the things that people went through. And I think that's what's missing with education. You can't actually tell them exactly what people were going to. Whereas this, you could start to experience it and understand the terror to actually go out there and do it.
You've got it. Yeah, that's what we want to do.
So, Brian, can I ask you a question then as well, please?
All right, Mike.
How are you doing? All right?
All right, mate.
Yeah. So I'm saying, if you then give these people this really real experience, what about the psychological effects, possibly, that they could actually have, because it then becomes real?
Yeah, you're right.
This is where we need the standards, and we need some sort of committee that says, if you're going to do some sort of education in this way, you have to be mindful of the well-being of the people.
And I think
you've got too many people. Too many people are doing it on their own. We need to be more together. It's the same with the stuff that you do. If we get some commonality and get some standards around it and look after people while they're experiencing it, then the experience could be as much or as little as you want to make it.
Yeah, and I think you can tailor it. For example, we're not going to make an experience of Auschwitz where you're put in 1943 when people were there. But if you can experience it to a degree of emotion that makes you remember it but not be traumatic, I think you've got a happy medium there, Mike. And yeah, it's a really good question. Soon, the technology will be there for you to land on D-Day with machine guns firing, with men all around you dying. We wouldn't want to do that. That is, you've got Saving Private Ryan as a film for that. I don't think this medium needs that. It's one of the reasons why we're not really too keen on the likes of Grand Theft Auto in a virtual world. I think it's too harrowing. I think it's too much.
I think there is a space for that, because if you want to teach people not to go down that road, maybe from the criminal sort of point of view, if you're experiencing and getting empathy with the victims and the terror, then that can educate you not to go down that route. So there's a fine balance between the two, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Balance is key, and I think we could do it. I think we could easily get that balance and make it an emotive experience, but not go overboard, Mike. Not go way overboard where people go, okay, that's put me off, and now I can't stop thinking about it. Yeah.
I'm just conscious of the YouTube.
Thanks.
Oscar, have you had any questions come through on the comments box at all?
No, I checked. There is none.
Okay, that's good. Any more questions? Because I know we've only got about 4 minutes left of the link. Put your hand up if you can't, if you're muted and you can't say anything. Can't see anybody putting their hand up, so. Joe, you sneaked up on me then.
Thank you for showing us.
Karen.
Yeah, no, I was just saying thank you. It's a very, very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we had a.
Go on. I would like to thank Joe, Lawrence, Alex, Dan, and Chris for putting everything together. Oscar for streaming on YouTube. The video will be out on Xrfiles channel. It'll be edited, so we'll cut out a little bits of me speaking probably, and we'll put that out there. So if you want to subscribe to that. Other than that, I think these guys have done a fantastic job and need a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Hope you found it interesting.
Yeah.
Get in
you for having
touch
us.
if you get in touch
thanks,
if there's
guys.
another World War II battle or anything that you want to see, or you think would be interested if we recreated something else in VR. Get in touch. LinkedIn all over the place. World War II Nation, River, Infinite Pixel. You'll find us.
We will be posting. You can mention my consultancy as well if you want to. Don't matter. We'll be posting on LinkedIn, and if you've got any comments, please put the comments in there that say if you enjoyed it, if you've got any advice, if you think lessons should go this way. We want to learn from this to make the experiences better, but also from Alex and Lawrence's point of view, and Joe's, is they want to start building some real lessons out of this. So any impact, any things you put down will be very valuable to us.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, we're going to say goodbye to our YouTube people.
Thank you.
Oscar.
I'm streaming in a second.